Hi, I'm Scott Lucas. This is today's EA Worldview on Syria. Does the fall of Homs mean that President Assad is finally winning? In a brief word, no. Almost all the major headlines in Western media this week were about the final departure of insurgents from Homs, Syria's third largest city, after more than 2 years of resistance against regime bombardments, siege, and air attacks. The presentation was, now that insurgents have left the so-called cradle of the revolution, then the insurgency itself must be over. The opposition must be crushed. It's a narrow picture, and it's a completely wrong one. Yes, of course the Syrian regime is going to present this as a great victory, that finally it now has Homs, as well as Damascus, as well as Hama, as well as most cities in Syria. Yes, it is going to do this to support the re-election of President Assad in June. Yes, it is going to do this to try to convince other international powers that it is no longer worth even talking to the opposition. But presentation isn't necessarily the truth. Let's consider a couple of other things from a different point of view. First, Homs from the insurgency's point of view. Look, Homs was lost to President Assad 2 years ago. In early 2012, when regime forces leveled sections of Homs, such as Baba Amma, they crushed most of the insurgency at the cost of many thousands of lives. Insurgents remained in a series of districts in Homs, but they were no longer in a position to capture the city. They could only just hold out. When Assad forces carried out another military offensive in summer 2013, taking areas such as Haladiya, again effectively leveling it first, that position was confirmed. It was only a matter of time before the final insurgents would have to leave or simply die from starvation as well as the air attacks. Yet even in that desperate position, the Syrian forces, after months of effort, could not take the final districts with a ground assault. The only way they could claim Homs was through a negotiated evacuation, one which did not kill the fighters, but lets them live to fight another day, moving to villages north of the city. So yes, this will be a symbolic victory for the regime, or will present it as so, but it will do so in almost complete isolation from what is happening elsewhere at the same time in Syria. All along, key groups in the insurgency said, look, if we can tie up regime forces in Homs, we can fight elsewhere. It is true that they effectively sacrificed many of their men to that effort, something that some of them felt quite bitter about as they left the city yesterday. But it is also true that fights were carried on. Consider, for example, in the southwest, where insurgents control nearly all the territory now between Kenitra, near the demilitarized zone with Israel, and Daraa, the so-called birthplace of the revolution in 2011. Consider in the northwest that insurgents continue to make advances in Idlib province, blowing up a regime base last week, and importantly, they continue to press on the regime in Aleppo, that divided city. Indeed, even as Homs was being evacuated, the insurgents were stealing a couple of headlines by blowing up the Carlton Citadel Hotel, a major regime base near the heart of the city. Consider that insurgents hold and will continue to hold most of northern and eastern Syria, and consider that insurgents, despite sustained regime efforts, have pushed back the efforts of the Syrian military to take areas near Damascus in East Ghouta. All of this does not add up to a counter-narrative that the insurgents are winning. It merely reinforces that this is a patchwork war. If you want to take one piece of the quilt and look at Homs, okay, you can go out and parade the fact that President Assad has triumphed. But if you take another piece elsewhere in the country, you can say that Assad's forces are in serious trouble. The media will move on from Homs. The question is whether they will notice the rest of the Syrian conflict, or be stuck in a narrative largely around the showpiece of President Assad's election. For if they are caught up in that, we will not get any closer to an idea of what is happening in a conflict that is going to go on and on and on. I'm Scott Lucas, and this is today's EA Worldview on Syria.